Welcome to another episode of ideaXme. My name is Amanda Christensen, ideaXme guest contributor and strategist at Cubaka, a social media agency. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Marc Oshima, co-founder and chief marketing officer of AeroFarms. Marc, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Yeah, excited to be here. Always really excited to be able to share our story about what AeroFarms is doing to transform agriculture. And really, it's a story that starts with inspiration and our mission. And so, happy to go into more details, but excited to be with you here, Amanda.
Fantastic. It'd be great if we could actually get a bit of your background kind of prior to joining AeroFarms so we can get to know a bit more about yourself and kind of what inspired you to create AeroFarms.
Yeah, thanks. And you think about where you are today. It's usually the sum of all the experiences that got you here. And I've been very fortunate in terms of my journey and thinking about the kind of work we're doing today, the kind of impact. But my background has been in marketing. It's always been a curiosity in terms of thinking about how people are thinking, the psychology, but more importantly, thinking about how to create a brand, how to create the right business model to be able to connect. My background has been in food. I've headed the marketing for food retailers here in the United States, but also background in CPG, brand management, working for global companies like L'Oreal. Also had the opportunity to work in the media industry, working for Turner Broadcasting as well. And so this idea of, again, how to connect, how to create new businesses has been a passion of mine. And I have a whole career of thinking about launching new companies, new brands, new businesses. And so always starting with the consumer and thinking about, again, what are the problems? What's the solution? And for me, for AeroFarms, this actual inspiration was thinking about how our food system is more challenged than ever before. And this is when I was heading the marketing for the food retailer and being, right on the front lines with the consumer, the interests around, where your food's coming from, how it's prepared, how it's sourced. These are the questions that got me excited to think more about how we can reimagine, our food system, reimagine agriculture. And so that led to this idea of being one of the founders of AeroFarms. There are three of us. And it's a reminder that it really takes a village. Today the organization's over 200 people, but the idea that this is a new way of farming, the idea that again there was our CEO David Rosenberg, who's the ultimate visionary in terms of thinking again the broader impact we can have around the world, and again facing these macro issues around urban growth, urbanization, lack of fresh water, lack of and loss of arable land. These issues are becoming more acute every single day. Our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Anna Arwood, really passionate about reimagining, again, where you could put farms, how you could think about farms, growing indoors, this idea of distributed farming, bringing the farms to the communities. And my background, as I mentioned, has been in retail. And it's this idea that, again, you can have the best technology, you can have the best product, but again, unless you know how to bring it to market and have the right strategies in terms of, again, understanding what's the right offering. But for us, this underpinning was thinking about from day one, all the different stakeholders and thinking about how do we create this mission-driven organization, about how do we enable local production at first, but then today our mission is how do we grow the best plants possible for the betterment of humanity. So bold, visionary, but it's also one that inspires us to do better every single day.
Definitely. And working in marketing and particularly the social space, I'm seeing a lot of those conversations, both in terms of wider conversations around people expecting more from brands in terms to kind of walk the walk and not just talk the talk, but as well as making a lot more kind of informed decisions about the food they're eating, supply chains it comes from, and that impact on the environment. Would you say that's kind of where you had these initial spark to found AeroFarms, or what was the kind of journey in actually creating it?
Yeah, so I think you got really at the heart of this, which is, again, this consumer is looking for authenticity. They're looking for transparency. They're looking for how to vote with their wallets in companies that they trust, right? And that idea. And so for us, we are a certified B Corporation. So we actually have a scorecard, on how we're doing on both environmental factors and societal factors. But this idea on the environment, this way of growing that we've developed for indoor farming We're able to grow with up to 95% less water and even 40% less than hydroponics. We're able to grow with zero pesticides. So this is really just transforming how we think about these key inputs, in terms of farming in and of itself. But we're also thinking about the idea that we're creating year-round, jobs with fair wages and benefits. This idea that this is able to grow in warehouses, so we're independent of climate, independent of seasons, and we're creating the perfect environment for the plants, but ultimately we're creating a great environment for our team members too to be able to operate. And so all the more, we think about what we've been facing now with COVID. We've seen how challenged our food system is, how complex the supply chains typically are, but by putting the farms right in the communities, we're able to serve the communities every single day and bring them a great tasting, nutritious, safe product. And so, yeah, this has been exciting for us to reimagine what agriculture is and how we can elevate agriculture and how we can think about, a really different product as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
Definitely. And going into the actual product itself, we've spoken a lot about the kind of ongoing conversations and the inception, but could you tell us, for those who are less familiar with vertical farming, exactly what AeroFarms does and a bit about vertical farming?
Yeah, so this idea with our expertise, and we've been really blazing this new ground and really writing a new playbook in agriculture. We've been one of the pioneers and one of the leaders in indoor vertical farming. We've grown over 550 different crops. And so this idea, it's not a technology limitation. We can actually grow anything. And we used to say that, well, we wouldn't grow a tree, but in fact, we just announced a major partnership with Cargill where we're actually working on and focusing on the cacao tree. So the impact we can have has been tremendously exciting. You can see behind me one of our vertical farms. It's actually been optimized specifically for leafy greens and herbs. And so this idea of multiple layers, the crop cycle, the production, we're getting tremendous amount of yields, up to 390 times greater productivity per square foot than the field farm. And again, while using that 95% less water and 99% less land. But the idea that we can grow a wide range of different crops. Earlier in the year, we announced a major partnership with Hortifruit, which is the largest berry company in the world. So the idea that we can grow blueberries indoors. We've been growing beautiful strawberries as well. So this idea that we can have an impact in so many different categories of food, but what's been exciting for us as a company is not only the commercial growing that we're doing, and we're expanding farms here in the US, we're in the process of building out in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE right now, a large scale, what will be the world's largest indoor vertical farm just for R&D purposes. And it really speaks to the expertise we have as a company. When we think about everything that you see behind us is proprietary technology. So not only do we have the plant scientists, the horticulturists, the plant pathologists, biologists on staff, we also have the engineers, the mechanical engineers, the lighting engineers, the industrial engineers, PLC engineers, how to think holistically, how to bring this together. We have registered dietitians on staff. So thinking about that plant health, how it translates into human health, and thinking about the entire equation. Well, we've been able to take this expertise and then think about really anything plant-based. And so as a company, we're working on a far-ranging type of product assortment as well. Besides our proven commercial leafy greens, we're working in other categories of pharmaceutical, cosmeceutical, nutraceutical, and thinking about how we can help these companies solve their supply chain needs as well. So it's been tremendously exciting for AeroFarms and the growth and the trajectory.
Yeah, that's really fantastic, just how it's expanding beyond just the normal kind of food and consumer goods perspective, but touching all of these other sides of things. You mentioned specifically about the engineers that are working on this. Can you tell us a bit about the technology behind it? I know that AI is involved in the regulation, and it'd be great to get a bit of background around that, the kind of benefits of that, any possible threats around that. That would be great.
Yeah. So we've actually, thought about a system approach, and we actually have called this ag stack. And the idea that it's both the hardware, the software, it's this integration, it's the controls, and it's that understanding of how it all works together holistically. And so what we're thinking about this is really a smart, fully controlled farm. And so it's almost like a computer, if you will. Each one of these growing towers is its own little microcosm. There's sensors, there's integration. We're able to monitor millions of data points for each of the different harvests that we have. And so allows us to be able to use all those data sets and think about what we call a growing algorithm, where we actually have developed a very codified approach, and it's very formulaic in terms of, again, what's needed to be able to optimize that plant. We're marrying this information with tools like machine vision, machine learning, spectral imaging, things that the human eye can't even detect, that allows us to be able to look at the health of the plant, be able to ensure greater consistency of the plant, and this allows us then think about, ultimately it's around the yield and having that sustainable business plan, but it's really about how we can actually then develop the characteristics of the plant in very unique ways, very unique to what we're offering. So we can make something more spicy, we can make something more sweet, we can actually change the color or even the morphology by stressing the plants in different ways. And so this expertise in what we call phenotyping, changing the environmental factors, is an exciting area for us. And then now we've been marrying that expertise even on the seed and the breeding, doing speed breeding, and the idea that we can actually optimize the seeds then for the indoor environments as well. And then really think about, we're creating a new category of food, better flavor, locally grown, fresh, this idea of more nutrition as well. So this is an exciting area for us when we think about how to have an impact in the marketplace, have some product differentiation, be able to partner closely with our selling partners in creating these product offerings, and then ultimately delighting the consumer.
That's great. And immediately two kind of films popped into my head when you were describing that. On the one hand, you kind of have the Willy Wonka-esque, creating snozzberries that taste even more like snozzberries. But then on the other hand, a recent British film that came out, Little Joe, that was talking about the kind of phenotyping and how plants can affect people's moods. And that one went a bit more the kind of disastrous way, but two equally kind of fantastical films that feel far away but are actually already happening quite clearly with AeroFarms. So that's really exciting to hear about.
Yeah, and that's what's, again, even for us in terms of you talking about some of sort of the fantastical notions that had, but it's really about the inspiration, the idea that we can do better, we can do more with less, and the idea that we can be inspired. And we're hoping to serve as that role too for the broader industry. But again, one of the key things that has allowed us to be successful has been key partners, from outside of industry as well. And that's helped us, again, recalibrate and think differently about the work we're doing today in farming. So a big partnership we just announced recently is with Nokia Bell Labs. And so the idea of how to work, with a telecommunications company, but the idea of using certainly the 5G platform, but the idea of imaging and the idea that we can be able to do real-time imaging of our plants has been an exciting marriage of our growing expertise and then with their expertise as well. So how we can then deploy these best practices. So it's been exciting to think about that growth as well.
That's really exciting and flows kind of perfectly into my next question in terms of what's next for AeroFarms. You've been talking about these partnerships as well as the R&D farm out in Abu Dhabi, and then what is kind of in terms of any kind of future legislation, leading industry trends. We have COP26 coming up, lots of kind of wider conversations that all kind of circle around your industry and AeroFarms for you in the future as well as the industry.
So what's exciting is that we're at this key inflection point of even more growth, right? And so this idea of expansion, we have a huge pipeline of projects just around our commercial leafy green farms. And so expanding not only here in the US, but the idea is, again, even with the R&D work we're doing, how we can have an impact with those partners around the world. The facility I mentioned to you in Abu Dhabi works with a wide range of different partners, both public and private. So that idea, how we can kind of uncover new opportunities, unlock more value, is an exciting area for us. But the core leafy greens is one that, again, how do we think, in this, day and age with climate change and challenges on our food supply, like how do we have a more resilient approach? One of the farms that we just announced that it's going to give us a nice big footprint into the Midwest is a farm that we're doing in the St. Louis region. But one of the convening partners there is the World Wildlife Fund, and they're very much invested in thinking again about, again, as one of the great stewards of the environment, right? Recognizing and appreciating that traditional agriculture has a tremendous toll, but it's also facing even more challenges with the increasing, temperatures, increasing, climate volatility. So they're a great partner because what we're trying to do then is take the lessons, from these farms and this indoor vertical farming, and then deploy it to other farms as well. So we're thinking constantly not only about what we're trying to do for AeroFarms, but what we can do for the broader industry, how we can truly lead a broader sustainable, agriculture movement.
And do you see this being the future of farming in general and eventually eradicating traditional farming? Is there kind of a coexistence or balance that's needed?
Yeah, so we're definitely big proponents that, this is part of the broader ecosystem. We need all stakeholders, including traditional field agriculture, to be part of the solution. We have more demands than ever before. But what we're excited about, what we're doing, again, it's not just about indoor vertical farming per se, but the fact is, if we can help something on speed breeding, on genetics, that then can be applied to those crops that are grown out in the field, we think we can have an impact in multiple different areas. And so there's no question these are multiple approaches that are needed. We're hoping to serve as that catalyst for further innovation that's needed, not only within the walls of our farms, but within agriculture overall. And so we're excited to be able to partner with traditional ag as well, thinking about new solutions. And so it's, again, how do we bring everybody forward, because we need to have everybody at the table.
You're speaking on all of these partnerships, and at IdeaXme, one of our biggest missions is talking about the people who move the story forward, hence why we've brought you on to speak with you. But we also love to know the kind of people that helped move your human story forward, that helped move AeroFarms forward. So is there anyone today that you'd like to give a special shout out to, or mention that, say, if you didn't meet them, AeroFarms wouldn't be where it is today?
Yeah, without question, the power of those relationships, the power of those mentorships, have been able to, help guide us. We know very fundamentally, like, what have been the key drivers. For me, when thinking about forming a company, just even the basic aspect of thinking about how to be a certified B Corporation, how do we increase access to more food, how do we help address issues around hunger, nutrient density. I was very fortunate to work for a number of years on the marketing advisory board for the Food Bank for New York City, a major large nonprofit. The leader at the time, Dr. Lucy Cabrera, just a phenomenal leader and inspirational force, and thinking about, again, how we have to do better and address these issues. And for me, it was always very seminal in thinking about access to food and thinking about, 1 out of 4 people are facing these issues in New York City. And again, we have to reimagine about what we think about food. And it's no longer a calorie either, it's about nutrient density. But Dr. Lucy Cabrera was one of the ones who opened my eyes about the issue, and recognizing that we can do better and how we can all play a role in that. And that was very much an inspiration for me in thinking about forming the company. But we've been fortunate in terms of thinking more broadly and thinking about the kind of impact. And so we've had, great mentors along the way. One of the mentors that we've had is a key mentor for our CEO, but a person by the name of Bill McDonough, who wrote the book on Cradle to Cradle. And our CEO, David's, had the first ever Cradle to Cradle certified product. But this idea that, again, how to be not just environmental stewards, but champions, how do we think differently? It's built into the DNA of the organization. And thinking differently has been part of, how we approach things. So we've been fortunate along the way to be inspired and been very fortunate to think about how we, in turn, can play a role in that as well. So we actually are playing a role right now today, helping mentoring other startup companies. And so this is something that, in terms of that sort of cycle of, kind of giving back to move everybody forward.
Definitely. That's something that we believe really, really strongly in here. So that's great to hear that you're taking the lessons and mentorship that you've received in the past and are carrying that on in the future. That's great. Another question that we ask at IdeaXme here is if there are any one individual you could meet, live, dead, throughout the sands of time, who would that be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. And let me I'll answer it in 2 parts. One will be looking back, right? And the idea, for us in the work we're doing today, in thinking about this marriage of biology and nature and then discovery, someone like a Charles Darwin, I think would be tremendously exciting to be able to hear firsthand about the process, about the scientific approach. That's something that has been really important to us in terms of the work we're doing today. But then be able to document this. When we say we're writing a new playbook, we'd love to, appreciate history and understand, what's gone, before us. When we talk about future forward, I would love to be able to interview, my grandson or my granddaughter and be able to understand, is the work we're doing today, did it have the impact that we wanted? We keep saying by 2050, we need to make sure, we address these things in terms of like, we're coming to this tipping point, right? And seeing, if the work we're doing today has really going to be paying off. So look forward to that moment in time.
I love your perspective on that. I don't think I've had anyone that I've asked that question to that's looking toward the future to see what kind of impact they're having and how the world sits with them as well. And I think that sits really well with what you were saying earlier about think differently. Definitely not a traditional answer we've gotten to that question, but I love it. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, Marc, thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been fascinating learning about AeroFarms, the work that you're doing, not only in the agricultural industry, but in numerous industries all around the world. And it's really inspiring to see the work that you're doing for the future. So thank you very much for your time today and for moving the human story forward.
Well, thank you as well, and appreciate getting a chance to share our story.